Hello and welcome back to the Cardiff Central podcast. It's 20 in a row for the Blue and Blacks over the Dragons after another slog in Newport gives Cornel van Zyl's side the best start to the season for almost a decade. Elsewhere, the Rags are back in style at cap. There's news of a first Wales squad in the Steve Tandy era. Teddy Williams' foot has fallen off. Two Reading football fans get lost, and who knows what Edinburgh side will turn up this weekend. Joining me on the panel this week, we've got Fraser Stroud. Fraser, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. Didn't have to eat any humble pie, so yeah, feeling pretty good.
Yes, so we've got Andrew Ford. Fordy, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, mate.
And Steve Coombs. Steve, how are you?
Very good. Absolutely pumped as ever.
Good stuff. Well, we'll get straight into it then. Dragons 17-24 Cardiff on Friday night at Rodney Parade. It was an interesting game if you're a rugby purist or you really like sort of tries from a couple of yards out. Started with Alex Mann and Brodie Coughlin trading maul tries early on. Two scores in 5 minutes then from Talupe Faletau and Dan Thomas secured the halftime lead for the Blue and Blacks. But it was a bit of a wait until Danny Southworth eventually got the bonus point try and made the game pretty much safe. A late Ben Carter try and an Angus O'Brien penalty threatened to make it interesting in the last, but it was too little too late for the home side. We got a few three-word thoughts that came in on social media afterwards. Reese says, great birthday presents. Happy birthday, Reese, for last Friday. Paul says, made hard work. Ben said, I'll take that. Rob, Wainwright v Cardiff. Tamara went with 5 points, thanks. Reese said scrappy but inevitable. Rob went with man versus boys, as in Alex Mann. And Gareth went with top of the league as Cardiff were, of course, sitting pretty at top of URC briefly until slipping down to fourth after results over the rest of the weekend. Fraser, coming to you first. So, general thoughts from proceedings on Friday?
Um, I mean, it wasn't a great game to watch. It was, yeah, it was pretty difficult at times, but it felt like a bit like rinse and repeat of other derbies we had against the Dragons. And I preface all this with all due respect to the Dragons, but it just didn't really feel like they offered a lot in attack against us, and we soaked up a lot of the possession they did have. Obviously, they scored a couple of tries, but I don't think I never felt nervous. And I guess that comes with like winning 20 times in a row against them, or have such a long streak. But they just really didn't look that impressive in attack. So there weren't points where I was worried that they might get on the outside or make these breaks. It didn't really happen that much. I think we fronted up really well in the forward, but in the pack. And because I think there was talk of like the Dragons trying to bully us or like really get in our faces. And I think we just, faced up to it and kind of probably were the better team in terms of the physicality. And we really were good in the scrum. We fronted up, took our chances in the 22, really clinical. Um, had some really good performances in it. I think Alex Mann was, yeah, he was superb, especially, yeah, I mean, throughout the game, the little deft hands for the third try was really impressive from the base of the ruck. Yeah, I think he was born to have a bandage and blood kind of pouring out from under it. That's his look, and he should every game he should go into it like that because I think that's just it epitomizes the type of player he is. Um, and yeah, it just felt like a solid win. We got the bonus point. It wasn't very exciting. I think our attack was kind of hit and miss. We few occasions we troubled them, but ultimately it was a scrappy win. But we got the bonus point, came away with it. I'm delighted that we got the points.
Good stuff. Fordy, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, bonus point win. So pretty happy. I think we were made to work for it a bit. I think they kind of sussed our backline play out quite well. And it kind of surprised me they didn't resort to we didn't resort more to forward play sooner because especially uh essentially every try was just kind of getting one over them in the pack. But yeah, some very strong performances by individuals, and obviously very good to see Talupe Faletau back.
Absolutely. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, if you told me before the game it was going to finish at 24-17, I'd say, yeah, that sounds about right for a Cardiff Dragons game. A bit frustrated because I think it looked like you had the feeling for a bit when Danny Southworth went over that we were going to open up a bit. It felt like, Dragons' heads were down and that might be the chance for us to start playing, but then the game sort of developed in a direction I didn't necessarily enjoy in the last 20 minutes. But yeah, pretty standard win over the Dragons, the sort of thing we've just got used to, and must be pretty horrible for their fans because I suppose in a way, games that you lose that you feel like maybe you could have won or you should have done a bit better in are more painful than the real shellackings. Um, but yeah, pretty standard.
A couple more three-word thoughts. Nathan went with poor game standard, and Gareth sort of similar, but in a slightly different angle on it. Went with boring. So what? Fraser, does it matter that it wasn't a pretty win in a Welsh derby, and especially against the Dragons? Do we just sort of be happy with 5 points no matter how they come?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of inevitable. It's not going to be the highest standard. It was a bit niggly, It, there weren't any scraps, so I was disappointed in. I thought there'd be a bit of some fisticuffs with the type of players on the pitch. But yeah, I think we just take it's the bonus point. We got the bonus point. If we just scraped over and not got that, then I would have been a bit more disappointed. But we got the tries we needed, weren't pretty. I think there's a bigger question about kind of our attack moving forward. If we can still do what we were doing in the first couple of games in the future, but I think overall you just got to take it and accept that it was a not a turgid game, but we got over the line.
As we mentioned, it is a sort of typical result, especially at Rodney Parade. I had to look back. So Friday was a 7 point margin. The games before that were 2 point wins, 7 point win, 5 point win, and then two 1 point wins in a row. You have to go back to October 2018 for the last time the Dragons didn't get a losing bonus point off us and in this fixture in Newport, and that was only an 8 point victory at that. 4D. I think there's been maybe a little bit of criticism of Cardiff for a part that we played in perhaps not a great game. Was it really our fault? I don't know. I feel like I'm maybe like trying to diss the Dragons a bit here, but is it unfair to say that we go there and get dragged down to their level, and that's how we end up in these games at Rodney Parade?
I think it's such a hostile environment over at Rodney Parade. Like all the players were asked, and they posted some sort of Instagram reel where players were asked, like, what's the most hostile away ground to play at? And majority of them said Rodney Parade. So I think that kind of factors into it. But yeah, I don't think it was our fault we played the way we did. I think you got to consider like Domachowski, Faletau were all starting for the first time this season. You had George not playing after just coming on last week, and likewise Ben Thomas not since the start of the season. And you have those new combinations of McNally and Not and Ben Thomas, and then Jacob Beetham at 13. So it's kind of a bit of a learning process there. But I think we were still the better team. So I don't think it was kind of our fault that it wasn't a great game.
Uh, Steve Charlie sent in a question on Twitter, which said that Dragons and Connaught have both defended against us by filling the field and keeping numbers on feet, but we've shown that we don't just have to play expansive anymore and can put up a fight in the tight exchanges, which isn't a strength we've had for a long time. Is this new Cardiff now, or is it sort of circumstantial to the games the last 2 weeks, and we will get back to playing expansive at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I've been wondering this myself. I mean, is it's kind of inevitable over the course of the season that we're going to kind of incrementally see more Cornel Van Zyl come into the way we play. And I've thought about raising it on pods in the past, but there's always been so much to talk about. There's not really been room for it. Um, it's hard to say. Um, I you get the feeling that there's a perhaps a touch more pragmatism about the performances. But then it is quite clearly still Matt Sherritt's squad and Matt Sherritt's coaching team. I think one thing that occurs to me is that if the attack hasn't quite fired in the last couple of weeks because defenses have had a few games to look at us and have worked us out, that might be the moment where you think we need someone else in the coaching group, another backs attack specialist, because Johnny Goodrich is relatively inexperienced. That might be a factor. But yeah, I can't like really articulate a point at one thing, but I do get the sense that there's a little bit more of a pragmatic South African edge about this team now. But I can't really tell you why that is. It's just a vibe I'm picking up.
It's funny after all the years of begging for a South African influence, and we thought he
Yeah.
would become in a massive second row, and it's actually becoming the head coach as it's turned out in the end. But it is interesting that we do have different ways to win now, and I don't think that's something that should be knocked as such. This is
No.
definitely better, even if it's not perhaps the easiest on the eye. Fraser, having said that,
Sorry. I mean,
sorry, go on.
just to pick up on that a bit. If you go back 2 years ago, we were playing games very similar to that Dragons game and very similar to the Connacht game, but we were on the wrong end of the scoreline by a try or so, and we'd have played like really nice rugby in the course of that game, but ultimately you only get so many brownie points for looking nice while losing. Um, on balance, I think I will take the tight wins, however they come.
Fraser, in amongst the sort of maybe lack of showy stuff from Cardiff, there have been a couple of interesting tweaks this season. There's been Dan Thomas dropping into the backfield on kick receipts, which has worked quite well in terms of scooping up loose balls. And then what we saw on Friday, two of the tries coming from this little like fake carry pop pass type thing, which Dan Thomas and Tulubi Faletau got over. Does it feel like we are a smarter team now? Like we're picking up on things quicker, maybe adapting to the referee as well. He was quite quick on the whistle in the first half on Friday.
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're showing like the kind of maturity, and I guess that comes with the team being together for a couple of seasons and kind of getting used to the. I mean, obviously now Jockey's gone, but like getting used to the style of play, what we're trying to do, knowing when to do it and when not to do it. I think like the kicking strategy, I think is being good in terms of like knowing when right we're not really getting anywhere here. Let's do a kick. Let's get rid of possession or like make it completable. I think Sheedy's played a big part in that. And I think in terms of the referee, yeah, I thought we played it really well because yeah, the that Italian guy was very pernickety about. Like, he was very precise about the issues that he was um, calling up on, and it was a bit. Sometimes it felt a bit harsh. And I looked at the stats; we actually conceded more penalties, but I don't know. It certainly didn't feel like that, and I guess it's where the penalties were conceded. Maybe we're better at like risking it in different areas and not giving away silly penalties and like giving away lots of possession and territory. But I do think it seems like we've matured and we've got a cooler head in difficult circumstances, so we're not making silly errors at silly times. Because I think we last season there seemed to be a tendency where it was like, oh, we're getting back in the game, or like, oh, we're slipping a bit here. We need to like tighten up, and then we didn't, or we made an error, or we dropped the ball, or we did these like little things that kind of capitulated or like built up, and then we lost the game by a score or something like that. And it feels like we haven't done that this year. I don't know precisely what it is, but it definitely feels there's been a progression in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really key point is that we're definitely not piggybacking teams down the pitch anymore, which is something we did an awful lot last season. We're cutting that out quite quickly. And even little things like, I don't know whether it was on purpose, but that Coughlin try, the first one, where we've pulled them all down there almost certainly as it's sort of flying towards the line. And then we kind of stand off and let him dive over. Now, it might have just been a total switch off for everybody involved who was expecting a whistle. But like it works out quite cleverly because that could easily have been the referee going under the posts, yellow card, and we're down struggling for 10 minutes there. So it's something which we're avoiding those moments in games a lot more and putting ourselves in position to capitalize on other teams' mistakes as well a lot better by keeping possession more. Andrew, the attack didn't fire again massively on Friday, having struggled a little bit against Connacht. Well, it was five line breaks, which was two less than Dragons made. 16 turnovers lost as well, according to Rugby Pass. I don't know if it's like simplistic to just point to this area in particular, but did the Beetham experiment work at 13?
I mean, particularly in the first half, there were a few line breaks, kind of where he was defending. But like looking back, I don't think they were directly his fault, and it's always going to be a learning curve. Him starting at 13, but I think we won at the end of the day, bonus point win. I think you can. There's a lot to learn from there. There's one part like in the second half when he was on the break from a little Callum Sheedy nudge. I was a bit disappointed. He went to kind of bosh Tinas de Beer, and you think having played with him for the last 2 years, you know what sort of guy he is when it comes to defending. And then Tinas goes and gets the jackal turnover straight away. But I think that's the sort of thing that where he was on the pitch, that would have happened regardless if he was playing wing or fullback. But yeah, it wasn't a game for the backs really, that game on Friday. So I think there's a lot to learn from really. But yeah, going forward, I think he is probably an option to consider at 13, especially. I don't think we can rely on Millard all season.
Yeah, I asked the question because he's clearly worth sticking with there. He's got all the attributes there. I think probably what happened is that he basically ended up sort of playing 12 and a half, I think, rather than 13 in a lot of the attacking phase. And it narrowed us down quite a lot. Whereas you thought there was some phases of attack where I thought, oh, Millard would get on an outside break there. There'd be a bit of go forward, and Beetham naturally just kind of snuck inside, which worked really well for the fourth try. The pass to release Adams and Bowen on the outside is Beetham stepping into that playmaker role, but you'd like to see him perhaps where Adams was making that outside break rather than being the one giving the pass. But it's certainly he certainly showed more than enough attributes to continue pushing on with him there. And we'll get onto the Wales squad in a bit, but looking at it at the moment, he might end up playing there against South Africa in a couple of weeks as well, which would be a good test. Steve, the other player to pick out, I thought. Obviously, we've mentioned how good Alex Mann was. I think we could do a whole podcast on what he got up to on the night. But very quietly, Dan Thomas has nailed down that 7 jersey this season, which I'm not sure too many people would have predicted necessarily with both of them if he was fit and Basham coming in. He's currently third for turnovers won across the URC as a whole. We knew he was a good player at Bristol, but did we think he'd be this good coming into his second season with us?
Um, yeah, he surprised me too. I thought after the Lions game, Basham had the 7 shirt pretty much sewn up. So I've been surprised by the fact that he's been become a little bit of a bit part player off the bench. Um, Dan Thomas has been incredibly industrious. I think we knew we'd get industry and work rate from Dan Thomas. I suppose the suspicion would be maybe he's winding down his career, but you're not getting that sense this season. Perhaps this is, and it's impossible to tell, but perhaps this is another indication of what Cornel Van Zyl prefers. Perhaps if Bouchard was still here, then he would be going for Basham with that extra ability going forward. Van Zyl as a front five guy, first and foremost, he wants work rate. He wants a bit of steel in defence, and Dan Thomas fits in very well with that. But yeah, a little surprising, but a fantastic season thus far.
Absolutely. I think that almost wraps up the game from Friday from our perspective. I made a couple of notes and I listened to the Dragons pod again this week just to see what they were picking out from the game. They were quite disappointed, I think, with the sort of fight shown from their players and the lack of real sort of niggle or anything like that. Whereas I thought the Cardiff players turned up with like a real shithousery thing in their
Yeah.
back pocket. That very first Shane Lewis Hughes penalty, and then Belcher's straight up to him and tapping him on the back of the head, and then Alex Mann give a little something to Tinas de Beer as well during the first half, and you just thought, yeah, that's what you want to see from a derby as a supporter. And I think the Dragons guys are right that their players didn't really show much of that. The only one who was really trying to do something was De Beer, and I think that actually backfired on him in the end because he just tried too hard basically for 80 minutes to try and make anything happen, and that went badly in a lot of his kicking execution and a couple of handling errors as well. But yeah, from a Cardiff perspective, it's exactly what you want to see from a Dragons Cardiff game, especially going out to Rodney Parade. And I know Harley said on the wrap as well that he noticed when the players were going down the tunnel after the warm up that the Dragon supporters were giving him a bit on the terrace, and that the Cardiff players just seemed totally unfazed by that as well. And he fancied at that point he knew we were going to win, which is a good sign as well that everyone knows what to expect down there and uses it as motivation rather than lets it get on top of them. Um, Unless anyone else has got anything particularly further they
I,
want to say. Go on, Steve.
yeah, I mean, I guess the difference, perhaps. I mean, Harley's right. I mean, you did get that sense. I suppose it's just the difference between a team that's been winning and a team that's been losing, isn't it? Very, very different, difficult to break that losing mentality that inevitably develops. And yeah, we looked the more confident team, and that was the difference, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of don't feel sorry for Dragons because they're rivals, but listening to their pod and then sort of asking what happens next. And I mean, I don't even know what happens next from a total non-emotional point of view for the Dragons. I don't know if coaching change helps. I don't know if player change really helps. I'm not really sure where they turn to now.
When your
Yeah,
rival
no,
is pitying you, that's the most annoying thing you can
Yeah.
possibly hear. When we got battered by England, all my mates, English mates, were like, "I'm really, I don't like to see the Wales being so shit." I'm like, "Shut the fuck up!" It
yeah. Well,
really gets on my nerves.
on that note, it might not be what they want to hear, but I do like genuinely feel for the Dragon supporters because if you look at like average attendances, I mean, after us, they were second of all the Welsh teams last year. They were averaging about 6,000, I recall. They've been dreadful for a very long time. I can't actually remember a time when they were a generally competitive side. I'm not saying that to knock them. I'm just pointing out that they've been really, really poor and not really delivering on the field for a long time. But you've still got like 6,000 people turning up regularly to watch them. Incredibly committed support base, truly. Um, and they deserve something.
Yeah, I mean, good on them for turning. I think it's probably gone past the point where they can turn their backs now and they're just sort of resigned to continually going down there forever. There's a point where you can say, "Oh, I'm done now," and then they've gone past that and they're just stuck in this never-ending doom spiral. But yeah, absolutely fair play for them turning up. And I know that early try definitely took the sting out of it, but there was still a decent atmosphere. It sounded like on the telly from where I was at least anyway. So it's good to know there's still a bit of bite in the derby despite the long wins. Which and just to clarify as well, because I know there was some confusion, it's 20 wins in all competitions and it's 21 in the league because we lost that European Cup game for them. Just in case anybody really wants to keep that stat. Right, we're going to go on to Rags Corner next, and as the news sort of covers the Wales squad as well. So the Rags were back in action after a couple of weeks off. On Saturday, they hosted Aberavon at the Arms Park and secured a 45-26 win, which is a super duper bonus point win with the 6 points in the league, getting them back up and running after a tough start to the campaign. Tries were from Alan Rees, Derry Cross, Tom Cottle, Matty Young, Joe Goodchild, Joe Cowell, and Oshan Darwin Lewis. And there was 10 points from the boot of Lloyd Lucas as well. Some of the tries are cracking. Matty Young and Joe Goodchild's efforts, in particular, are really good solo tries. Steve, I know you really enjoyed Joe Cowell's one as well. Talk us through that.
Massive fan of the Joe Cowell try. I think yeah, it would be a real shame if that is sort of like becomes a footnote to history and doesn't get wider recognition. If you go to the highlight reel of from the game on YouTube from about 4 minutes 25, I think it is, you see Will Davis King making a line break, Joe Cowell running in support as he runs sprints into the 22 and then throwing a nice dummy to go over. I think it possibly goes down as one of the all-time great front row tries. And I'd encourage everyone to give that a look.
Did enjoy just the sort of sheer joy of the celebration as well. A mix of I
Rightly
can't
so.
believe we've just done that, and also what a try.
It's you know what it is. It's the try. There's that joke about a prop will like fall over a yard from the line, and the commentator will say, "Oh, but by this evening that'll be from the halfway line." It actually was that try. It actually was that fantasy front row forward try. Terrific stuff.
Good stuff. The Rags are back in action this weekend. They host Pontypool at the Arms Park. It's a 4:25 p.m. kickoff. Forms a double header with the Edinburgh game, so do get down early for that one if you can. It should be quite a good game. Pontypool comfortably beat Bridgend last weekend and pretty much there or thereabouts with Cardiff in the middle of that table, looking to catch up with the leading two of Ebbw Vale and Llandovery early part of the season. Had a couple of Dragons lads playing for them. Morgan Allen still knocking around as well for Pooler, so should be quite a good game that, and I'm sure they'll bring plenty down as well. Also, shout out to the two Reading fans who rocked up at the Arms Park for the game against Aberavon on the weekend, who went to the Arms Park thinking that it was Cardiff City Stadium, as Cardiff City were instead hosting Reading. I don't know whether they stayed for the rugby or whether they went to the football in the end. I think they might have rather stayed for the rugby, as Reading did end up losing 2-1 to Cardiff after two second half goals. So either way, they've had an interesting day. I know I did see it. It was a tweet from Jonathan Carr who's noted the Reading fans had rocked up in response to a tweet that showed a Reading fan holding his passport because he believed that needed to get him into the country to watch Reading play Wales. So not a great day all around for Reading fans and their IQ, but
I can understand how you can end up going to the wrong stadium in Cardiff. It's probably been done before. I don't understand how you get to the stadium, pay for a ticket, go into the game, and still not realise that it isn't Reading. Um,
I'm hoping that because it's the Rags and the ticket bit is right by the clubhouse, they maybe got to that point and didn't end up paying before getting in.
right.
But either way, it is very good that they thought that was where Cardiff City play their football as well. Right, moving on to news then. Two pieces of injury news. The first one, a slight correction on what I said last week, and I do preface all of my injury updates with the fact that I am not a doctor. I've never claimed to be a doctor, and so when I claim that Roy Jennings may have hurt his knee quite badly against Munster, it of course was his hamstring that he hurt and not his knee. It's close enough. I'm claiming it is close enough, but he's not going to be out for quite as long as a bad knee injury would have kept him out. Done his hamstring. He'll be back hopefully for the festive fixtures, which would be a timely boost, I'm sure, for the first team. Unfortunately, somebody who is confirmed as being out for a significant amount of time is Teddy Williams after he hurt his foot in the game against Connacht. It's been described by Cornel Van Zyl as a dislocated foot, which is different from a dislocated ankle. A Google search looks absolutely minging of what the injury actually is. Van Zyl said last week that he's seen two specialists and they are forming a plan around which to get him back in action. But I'd be highly surprised if we saw him this season after that. It's especially at his age. I don't think they're going to want to rush him back, which is a shame for him, a massive shame for Cardiff, and a shame for Wales as well. Because looking at that squad, he'd have definitely been in and around a match day 23, just not let alone in the wider squad. So tough one for him, but hopefully he gets the right treatment and we'll see him back on the Arms Park as soon as he's ready. And then the other piece of news, which forms the middle part of our podcast, is the Wales squad has been announced for the Autumn International. Steve Tandy has named his first squad as Wales head coach. There's 9 Cardiff players included in the team, including a couple of players who maybe we wouldn't have predicted would be in at the time. So in the front row, there's Danny Southworth, Liam Belcher and Kieran Azarati. Then Alex Mann and Talupi Falatau in the back row. Callum Sheedy is back involved at fly half. There's Jacob Beetham as utility back. Ben Thomas at centre, covering fly half, I assume, as well. And then Josh Adams in the back three. Fordy, coming to you from sort of Cardiff perspective, what are our general thoughts on how the players that have got in and any who have missed out as well?
Yeah, quite happy with the players that have been called up. I think particularly Sheedy deserved it. I think looking at the 10 options, he's kind of fitted the mold of being included. I was surprised that Jared Evans was called up, but as a former Cardiff player, I was happy with that. Gutted for Cam Winnett, for example, but obviously hearing that he's potentially injured. But yeah, I think on paper, looking at that team, it looks like it's got some potential, but quite worried about the Zebra game, which clashes with the final game against South Africa.
Yeah, just on Cam Winnett, then Simon Thomas reporting on Twitter that it's a groin injury that's kept him out, which is absolute killer timing for him, for Cardiff and for Wales. He's been great for us in this first block, and I've no doubt would have been involved otherwise. And I had a good chance of getting adding to his cap tally as well. Steve, Danny Southworth in as a potential debutant. Is he now up there as one of our greatest Moneyball signings ever, sort of being plucked from the obscurity of the wider Exeter squad and become a real key player for us and now going on to international honours?
Yeah, I suppose it's once again demonstrates that our recruitment last season was pretty shrewd. I mean, not every signing was a winner, but in there were some really smart picks, and Southworth was one of them. Um, we've got some when everyone's fit, we've got some fairly impressive depth at the loose head now. Um, and he probably is. I don't know. Would he be first choice when everyone's fit? I'm not sure, but he's definitely demonstrated that he's a really solid URC loose head who can be very useful close to the lines as he showed again last weekend. And that's probably enough to demonstrate that he's worth a shot in international rugby. Um, it is also good to see Rhys Carey back in the squad. I'm assuming he was given special dispensation because I can't see how else PRB would have cleared him. I think they must have given him special dispensation because there's the threat of him being capped by someone else because of the stand down period. But it's good to see Carey back in, if a little frustrating that he's not doing it as a Cardiff player.
Yeah, that was my first thought as well. Is chuffed for Carey, and he's obviously been in great form for Saracens. But oh, we've been stitched up by Gatland big time there,
Oh
haven't
yeah.
we? Just the refusal to pick him, and when he was playing so well for us, and I don't think there's much doubt. Obviously, we don't know the exact ins and outs, but the strong sense is that if he was getting picked by Wales, he probably would have stayed in Cardiff at that time and signed a new deal with us rather than. I don't blame him at all for going to Saracens in the circumstances, but yeah, so a real kick in the teeth for us. Fraser, a couple of questions came in on socials regarding the squad. Gareth and Matthew both referenced Alan Lawrence, whether he's unlucky to miss out. Matthew says, "What more does Al Lawrence have to do to get a Wales cap?" Is it a reflection on Al Lawrence, or is it a reflection on that Wales could name about 8 different back rows and they still be quite good at the moment?
Yeah, I don't think it's a reflection on Alan Lawrence. I think he's clearly been good for. He was great for Cardiff last season. He's continued to be good this season. He's an excellent player. But there is a lot of competition in the back row, especially number. I mean, Falatau, Wainwright. They've drafted in Morgan Morse, and to be fair, like I think Morgan Morse is a potentially an incredibly good player, and he was unlucky not to get in the squad in the summer going to Japan. So it's like I think it's kind of due for him. So it is a shame that Big Al is not in the squad. I think if he had been put in there, I would have been surprised. But I would have also kind of props to and he would have deserved his place there. And then yeah, I think he's mainly an eight as well, so it's kind of flexibility might get in the way of that. And then yeah, our back row riches are pretty stacked in that position for Wales. Um, so as much as I'm a little bit disappointed not to see him in there, I also completely understand why he's not been given that chance at this point in time. And who knows, injuries might crop up. He might get drafted in, especially with Jockey in the coaching squad. But I think it's fair enough, unfortunately for him.
He did get a mention in the press conference.
Oh, did he?
Tandy gave him
Oh
a
wow.
little shout out, so it wouldn't surprise me if maybe he's on the standby list next cab off the rank if someone gets injured. So I wouldn't rule out him possibly getting a cap this autumn. But
Uh,
there is a lot of depth there.
yeah, I didn't. That's a nice touch from Tandy. That's just to give a player. I think quite often there can be calls for players to be promoted. We've discussed it on the pod before about your quality regional players who maybe aren't quite test level players, but at the same time, I think what Gatland often failed to do, and Tandy noting Alan Lawrence hopefully shows a turn corner with that, is that there still needs to be the carrot of if you play well for your club, you can play for your national team. Like that form does matter, and playing well catches the eye. So that's an encouraging one. 4D, another player a Cardiff player who's mentioned quite a lot, and Gareth mentions as potentially being unlucky to miss out as well, is Tom Bowen. Obviously, after his explosive start to the season, he doesn't make it. Good thing, bad thing? I don't know. It's it just one of those where it's like his time will come, so it doesn't matter too much.
I think, yeah, it's overall a good thing. I mentioned the group chat earlier. I'd made a highlight video of him, so I was a little bit bitter he wasn't included, so I couldn't post that. But the time will come, I'm sure. But yeah, I think you got to consider stuff like he's still only 19. He's very young. He's only played a handful of professional games. He was targeted quite heavily under the high ball against Munster. I do think he improved against the Dragons under the high ball. It was a good little one-handed catch at one point. But like you think against some of these, it's such a step up to international rugby, how much he'd be targeted there. And I think you've got to consider as well, like in the summer at the under 20s World Cup, he only started 2 games and he's probably one of the more experienced players in that Wales under 20 squad. So yeah, I think his time will certainly come. He's got a lot of development to come, and the way he's playing at the moment, the only way is up really.
It wouldn't be a surprise to see him asked to go and train with them. I suspect at some point in the autumn as well. They usually get a couple of youngsters up there to have a run out. So would expect to see his face in and around the Vale at some point. Steve, just on a general level with the Wales squad, I don't know, is there anything that sort of catches your eye as this is like a Tandy change or a way that we're maybe going to play? Or is it just a kind of he's picked a quite broad squad to have a look generally at a few different players?
I think you touched on it already. I think it was true in the summer actually, but this is a squad that's been picked on form, and that does feel like a big change to me because I think with Gatland and perhaps Pivac to an extent, there was a lot of selecting players for their potential, or because perhaps Gatland thought maybe they potentially had the building blocks of being an international rugby player. And very often you had the sense that he wasn't really looking at their club form. This feels like a squad that's very much been picked after having watched the first 4 games of the season. So it seems like a simple thing and a subtle change, but it already feels like a big difference from the Gatland era, and I think it's what's needed.
Fraser, it's obviously uh, Tandy's first international window in charge, so there'll be a bit of rope there. But it is also an important one with World Cup draw on the horizon and world rankings playing a big part in that in terms of what seeding you are and what pool you end up in. Is this a squad that can get a? I mean, obviously they'll be targeting the Japan game. Can they get close to any of the other Southern Hemisphere sides that are coming along, or do we just sort of say it's still early days? Let's try and build for the Six Nations and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Argentina would be the other team that you kind of think maybe we could get a result there, or at least come close. I'm doubtful about New Zealand and South Africa, but um, I, don't- I think it's still a bit too early to expect it to click. And for us, I mean, Argentina is the first game as well, which is probably not helpful in terms of the teams just got together, they have limited time, and then we expect them to be coherent and get a win off straight away. And the Argentina have really played well quite recently. You know, they've displayed that they're an excellent team. Um, so I think that'll be tricky. I think yeah, Japan will be the one we're targeting, and I think realistically, coming away with one win is probably I think that's what they'd be aiming for, and it's more about kind of. I'm just interested to see how we're going to play or like how we're going to line up, and I think we do need to be patient, and realistic about the team. We're coming from really low performance level, and like yeah, we've just beat Japan in Japan, which is great, but you know our losing streak was substantial, and I think we need to just be patient and positive we can. And if we need to just show the performances, I think is the main aspect of it, and kind of seeing a coherent way of playing. I'm hoping that that'll be the case with the new coach and team in place.
Good stuff. We did have another question from Gareth who asked about the Zebra game on the last weekend in November, which falls on the same weekend as the South Africa versus Wales out of window test. We will touch on that a bit more next weekend about what sort of team, if any, Cardiff can put out. We'll do a proper autumn internationals preview then, game by game, and look ahead to that next block of fixtures for Cardiff after this block has finished. We think there is a team there. We think we can get a 23 out, but I think the other aspect of it will be how many call-ups are required during the autumn as well. As I think you look at a few Cardiff players, likes of Corey Domachowski and Reece Barrett potentially at loose head, Johan Lloyd as well, who might be sort of next cabs off the rank if there's a few injuries in camp there, and obviously with those players based outside Wales not being available for that South Africa game, there'll be a few players who, even if they are fit, will have to go back to their clubs and replacements called up. So we will both basically just have to keep our fingers crossed for the entire month of November leading up to that game against Edinburgh and hope that we can get something together then. But the other thing is whether a couple of Cardiff players might be fit again by then. We know that Botham was coming back round to fitness. Elijah Evans should be back by then as well. And we wait to see the full extent of this Cam Winnick groin injury as well, but hopefully it's not too bad that it keeps him out beyond this test window. Is there any more on the Wales squad? We covered it quite well there before looking ahead to the games next week, but no, all good. We'll at this point of the pod then, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, if you're on any podcast platform, do feel free to like this pod and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video and subscribe to the Rap channel. Loads of stuff going up all the time, and also get on board with the Global Gainline channel where there's stuff from outside of Wales around the URC and over to America, South Africa, and beyond. We finished this week's pod then looking ahead to Cardiff's last game of this first fixture block of the season. We welcome Edinburgh to the Arms Park. Another 7:45 kickoff, this time back on Saturday evening. Edinburgh come to us having played a game less as their game against Ulster got called off in the midst of Storm Amy before they had to sit on a plane like the Scarlets, fortunately for them. Other than that, they've lost to Zebra and to Munster, both away, but bounced back last week with a fairly comprehensive 43-0 hammering of Benetton up in Scotland, with all of the usual candidates you might expect scoring for them in that game. We wait to see exactly what side Edinburgh are going to send down. They obviously have a number of players. I believe it's 13 in the Scotland squad that was announced by Gregor Townsend today. They play their out of window test a week Saturday at the start of the window rather than the end. They face USA. Obviously, with their overseas players not being available for that, it's going to be an entirely Glasgow and Edinburgh made up side. So we don't know at the moment whether that means that the likes of Duan van der Merwe, Darcy Graham, Pierre Schumann, etc., will be held back this weekend in order to be fit for that game against the USA, or whether they might be. I know they're not. The Townsend said in his interview they're not going into camp until next Monday, so whether they might still be available to play for their clubs this weekend. I asked a Scottish contact whose suggestion was that it'll be very much on a case by case basis rather than by any sort of blanket rule, as we might see if Wales were playing next weekend, that weekend, for example, and none of our players would be available to us. So, yeah, we part of me sort of enjoys seeing the likes of Van der Merwe come to town. Obviously, part of me would rather that he didn't turn up and just bully us around the pitch as well. So, there was a couple of questions about that on the pod. We don't really know is the answer to that one. Looking at the most recent head-to-heads, Edinburgh have had a pretty good record against us in recent years. They've won the last 4 in a row, most recently a 27-8 victory in October last year. It's usually quite a hotly contested game. Fordy, coming to you first, just from a Cardiff perspective at the end of this block, what do we think is the minimum result that we'd accept to sort of finish what would then be a good overall block for Cardiff?
For me personally, I think it's a win. I think if we want to get in the top 8, get to the playoffs, these are the games we really need to be winning. And I think that game last year, if I recall, we did make quite a good account of ourselves. So with the home fixture at the Arms Park, yeah, I'd like to hope that we win, especially just from the point of view of it'll be properly deflating going into Zebra if we're going into that game on the back of a loss. So yeah, expectation for me is a win.
Steve, it might seem a bit weird to say considering we've played Munster away in this fixture block, but is this our toughest test so far this season?
I think it's the biggest game so far this season. Because Andrew's right, we want to come out of this block on a win. And also, I know we've said we're not going to talk about rugby politics on these podcasts, but I think having a win which guarantees us being, like I guess we'd end up being in the top four after this weekend if we get the win. I think that would be a very useful statement to make. And also because of all the various shit going on, it's very important to maintain a sense of positivity that comes with winning games. So I'm not sure if it's going to be harder than the Munster game, but I think it's the biggest game this season. I think it's a really big game personally.
Fraser, obviously, we'll get into team selection in a moment now. I just wonder, though, just generally, with the two loanees at the club still in Will Rigg and Oshan Roberts, we obviously haven't seen either of them yet. Is there, do we have to pick them this weekend in order to avoid pissing off Exeter and Sale? Or is it a case that, they send them to us and we do what we like with them?
It's a tricky one. I could see why you might be a bit miffed if you were Sale in particular of a young player, because I guess the reason why they're loaning him out is for him to get game time in a competitive environment as opposed to playing for I don't know what Sale's under 21, so I don't know what the Premiership. I don't know
I
how
think
they
he plays for Coldy in the championship,
called it.
usually
Okay,
goes out to them, yeah.
yeah. So like I would be a bit miffed if he didn't get any game time with Cardiff. I don't know how long his loan is until the end of the season. Um,
How long's a
yeah,
piece of string, I think.
yeah, but so yeah, I could see why might be a bit annoyed. So like the idea of us like putting them in might be a good idea because yeah, you don't want to like burn bridges if they're offering you player or like they've given us the opportunity to take this player and like help us out. But also, we're probably paying for them, so we can do what we want. So and if it's not necessary and we are team like people recover from injuries, you shouldn't shoehorn players in for the sake of it, especially if it would risk like results. So whilst I would understand other teams being a bit annoyed and that possibly jeopardizing future loan deals, I think ultimately the most important thing is us winning and getting results against teams. If that means not picking these loan players who are brought in to plug gaps mainly, then I'd support that and go with that. There's no point in unnecessarily choosing someone just for the sake of it.
That's what we will discuss the 13 in a moment. A quick piece, some team news then. Obviously, we know when it's out, the same long-term absentees apply as previous weeks. Both of them still sidelined as far as we know. Ewan Stevens and Theo Cabango as well, still working their way back. Believe Elijah Evans is still out as well. No new injury updates as far as we're aware. Nobody seemed to be limping or obviously hurt after the Dragons game. The only question mark I think we've really got this weekend is Harry Millard. We don't know whether it was just a. Oh, Steve, do you know something?
I saw another tweet from Simon Thomas confirming Harry Millard's available.
Oh, there we go. Well, I've got no question marks, then, which is quite nice. That obviously that doesn't mean that
I'll
there are
find the
no.
tweet and see how he worded it, but I'm pretty sure he said he's available for the game. Carry on. While I do this, talk.
That will be a big boost.
Yeah.
Obviously, we didn't know that Winnett had been injured. We knew he'd gone off, but he didn't look obviously injured last week. So there may be obviously the few players we don't know about. But hopefully, it's a pretty clean bill of health. Apart from that, we're gonna go while Steve looks for that tweet about Miller. We'll go in the front row. 4D. It's obviously quite a few options still there at the moment. The incumbents are playing quite well, but Barrett's still there or thereabouts. Byrne to come back in. I think there's potentially a question mark about whether you bring David Hughes back in or not a hooker. What are you going with to start against Edinburgh in probably the area of the pitch that might be the most important on Saturday evening?
Yeah, I've got penciled in for me is to keep the same front row, the Rondo front row, especially after last week and kind of a forward orientated game. Just give them another go as the starting front row.
I don't suspect there'd be much in the way of argument on that. Second row, then obviously McNally is still permanently in there. Fraser, I think not went quite well. Done his sort of nuts and bolts stuff. There's obviously Donnell who could come back in. Thornton off the bench then as well. Which way would you go as McNally's partner?
I'd probably go not. Again, boring answer. Stick to the team we got. But yeah, I think George Knott did play pretty well against the Dragons. He fronted up like a bit of grunt. Yeah, I think he deserves to keep his place.
Look, according to the URC stats, anyway, he's yet to miss a tackle for Cardiff in the substitute appearance, and then the starting against Dragons last week. So that's certainly a positive in terms of what he offers, nuts and bolts wise. But I don't think Bowen answers are that bad, to be honest. After the last few years of like trying to piece together teams or plug gaps, it's quite nice to just have that level of consistency. Talking of which, then Steve, back row, I don't. Would you be tempted by any changes there necessarily?
Um, I mean, if Faletau is fit, Faletau starts. I think that's as read. Flankers, interesting. Massive fan of Alex Mann, as everybody else is. I think we're very quickly getting to the stage where he should be getting t-shirts and flags and all that sort of thing. Um, I think there might be an argument that with the size of the Edinburgh pack generally, which is generally how they beat us, you might want to start a slightly bigger back row and perhaps start Ben Donald at six or have Lawrence starting at six. I don't have any major preferences, but I could see perhaps Van Zyl looking at it and thinking, no, I want more big guys in my starting team. And we then have Alex Mann coming off the bench. At seven, as we said, Dan Thomas is in great form. Basham offers something a bit different. I'm wondering if we look at this and think, do we want to kind of start big against this Edinburgh team? Because I think we don't know what the selection policy for Edinburgh is going to be, but if it's on a case by case basis, I would think that might end up meaning that they've got a relatively strong starting 15, but the bench is a little thinner, which could mean that we end up finishing the game better um, by having a stronger bench, and so it might really pay off to have a strong start against a team like that. So yeah, I'd lean towards having Basham in there at seven.
I think Basham might. Well, Dan Thomas has played 2 games in a row as well, which is quite quite a lot. Did he play full 80 or at least
I was thinking it might be
majority?
three, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think Basham started the first, and then Thomas has started the next three potentially.
yeah. So maybe it's about time to just give him a bit of a rest. Just and yeah, Basham did well on this when he started. So yeah, I agree with Steve on maybe starting Basham.
Donald Basham Faletau back row certainly fits the bill as being big and abrasive. And just to say on Basham as well, he hasn't obviously didn't have a huge amount of chance off the bench, but that one carry off the top of a bit of a scrappy line out where his fend on Wainwright, I think Wainwright's probably still feeling that now a few days later, to be honest. That was a very important carry at the time just to relieve some pressure. Good chance for him to just sort of remind the Wales selectors of what he's got as well, should there be any injuries over the next month. For the scrum half, then obviously Ali Davis got the nod last week. Would we stick with him, or is Mulder coming back in for this one?
I think personally, I'd bring Mulder back in to kind of almost echo what Steve's saying. If we want like a good start and kind of up in their face, I think Mulder kind of fits that bill. And then hopefully, if we've got a kind of lead there going into the final 20, you can bring Ala Davis on to kind of shore things up and play that kind of safe tempo rugby. But yeah, starting with Mulder, I think you've got that faster paced rugby, and he's got a great combination with Sheedy as well, I think. So yeah, I'd bring Mulder back in.
Yeah, it was noticeable that I thought Davis managed the first hour quite well. He kicked nicely, but the change in tempo when Mulder came off the bench on Friday was really noticeable. And I think that fourth try comes from him getting that ball moving, and we can get to the edge a bit quicker than we had done for the rest of the game. So I certainly agree with that. Steve, a question came in from Ben, who says, if Sheedy is selected, this was before the Wales squad was announced, but if Sheedy is selected, would you start Lloyd at 10 this week and have Sheedy on the bench for a bit of rotation? I feel we have to give Lloyd a fair chance to stake his claim for the 10 jersey. What would you go with there?
No. I've been a bit surprised that we haven't seen more of Lloyd. But same with Basham, really. I thought that the likelihood at the start of the season would that they'd be rotated week to week, but Sheedy has made himself undroppable, I'd say. Um, I think he's becoming one of those heart of the team type players. So I think you and Lloyd but will probably have to wait for the Zebra game to get a start at 10. Um, and like I say, I think this is a big game, so I think we got to keep Sheedy in there.
Yeah, don't disagree with that at all. Did you find the Millard tweet?
Oh yeah, I did, and I've lost it again. But yeah, basically he confirmed that he's available to start this weekend.
Well, with
So
that in
I'm
mind,
reading
then.
that as him having talked to the Cardiff coaches, and it's a pretty broad hint, isn't it?
Yeah, Fraser. I mean, is it a no-brainer? They just come straight back in at 13. Despite what we said about the loan sign, if you were to take that out about the politics of the loan signings and just focus purely on a player perspective, is it just Millard if he's fit at the moment?
Yeah, I think Millard's got to come straight in, and I guess with it being injured, Beetham's going to possibly drop back to fullback. So I know we talked about giving Beetham some game time at 13, but needs must. I think Millard. I've been so impressed with him this season and last, but yeah, he's really shown up as a 13. So I think if he's fit, the tweet confirms it, then get him right back in there. Yeah, and then Ben Thomas, ideally, I'd say, but yeah,
Yeah, I've sort of Sharpie Thomas in at
nice. Yeah.
12 then. Uh, 40 then, I think Bowen and Adams probably stay on the wings. I don't think there's too much in the way of other option really, but certainly they've been playing very well. Fullback then, is it just as simple as a case of dropping Beetham back there, or could Lloyd come in there potentially? And there's also the left field option of Halfpenny still being available as well. What would you go with there?
I've gone for Jacob Beetham personally at 15. I think there's that he's not so much, can win it, kind of personifies composure whenever he plays. And I don't think Beetham's as composed, but he's not too far off. And I think that's maybe what's going to be needed on Saturday. Whereas with Johan Lloyd, he's sort of player that can spark something from nowhere. But it's a question of when was the last time he played 15 properly or started a game at 15, probably sometime last season for the Scarlets. But yeah, I think he's a better option to come off the bench because you've got that kind of, if we are chasing a game, you can chuck Johan Lloyd on to produce some sort of magic. But yeah, personally, I'd go Beetham.
Seems pretty fair. I do find it mad that imagine if somebody had said like 5 years ago, "Oh, Halfpenny will be back at the Arms Park and he'll never get considered for selection." And I mean, it's not the wrong decision. He's had a lot of injuries you wouldn't have predicted, but it is mad that somebody who's got so much international experience because can't get near the team at the moment because of these talented youngsters. But it is. I do wonder if we will see him turn out for the Rags maybe at some point over the next few weeks because he is somebody who may well be required for that trip to Zebra in the match day 23 somewhere. And if you're going to go out with a makeshift team, somebody with his experience is a pretty good head to have in that. Steve, bench-wise then, Van Zyl went back to a 6-2 against the Dragons for the first time this season. I don't know if that was maybe a bit of needs must with the lack of outside backs, but with the likes of Rigg and Roberts having had another week here now and Millard being back fit, would you switch back to a 5-3 or stick with the 6-2?
I think whether it was by accident or design, I think the 6-2 worked pretty well. It was a bit of a luxury to be able to bring on both Lawrence and Basham, I thought, and Lawrence made a definite impact. That that nice that nice flick on the touchline which led to the try. I'd be inclined to, yeah. I'm torn because I would actually like to see Will Rigg, and this might be a good game for him. I mean, 2 weeks you'd think would be enough to be brought on more or less at speed. I'm not sure. But I think because of the type of team Edinburgh are, big physical edge up front, and that's typically where they tend to beat us. I'd probably stick with a 6-2, I think.
Yeah, it does. I think Edinburgh, in my mind, is like a 6-2 sort of team when we go
Yeah.
up against them. Like that is, I almost like put them in the same bracket as somebody like the Bulls or one of those South African teams who you kind of think we might start well against them, but they've always got this sort of break glass in the case of emergency thing, which is just go absolutely direct and straight at the jumper and probably try to bully us a little bit. So, yeah, I think 6-2 is fair there. Fraser, replacement hooker wise, still Lloyd or Dav Hughes back in?
I'm a big fan of Lloyd. I don't know. I think I'd stick with him. I know David Hughes has done really well when he's come on, but for me, I think I'd go for Evan Lloyd. He's not on the Wales squad as well, so he's going to be playing more as a first choice. Like, well, against Zebra, I guess he'd be starting. But yeah, I'd probably go with Evan Lloyd. I rate him pretty highly.
And then for the back five forward cover wise, we've got Thornton still there as second row cover, and then we've got Alex Mann, Dan Thomas, and I'm missing somebody there, I think, am I? Alex Mann, Dan Thomas, and Alan
Alan
Lawrence,
Lawrence.
of course. Do you just go with the three back rowers potentially and use Donnell as second row cover, or does one of those have to miss out?
Yeah, I'm really conflicted to be honest, because I think there's an element of again, if we've got a slight lead, it's not a bad player to bring on in Rory Thornton to kind of shore up the line out. But yeah, I'm really unsure. I think you do go for I don't know. I'm happy to be persuaded because I'm just yeah, I'm really not sure.
Anyone any strong thoughts?
I think having Alex Mann and Alan Lawrence on the bench gives you plenty of impact in itself. Because Alex Mann can cover seven if he needs to. So you have that flexibility there. So I'd be inclined to give Dan Thomas the week off and go with Thornton for the bulk.
Fraser, any arguments for that?
No, I think yeah, Thornton in just to yeah shore things up if he gets come on. Yeah.
Uh, and then I've got Davis and Lloyd as our kind of two. Then I think that's a pretty standard two there in the circumstances. Um, my final question then, Fordy, was is from Tony of this parish on Blue Sky, who says, I think we've asked it. I don't know how long I've been on this podcast now, but I've said this every week pretty much. We've been talking about it. Does Ben start goal kicking now? Is this the time?
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. I'm just thinking as well in terms of if Sheedy plays for Wales in the autumn, starts a game. I don't imagine the coaches are going to be too confident with regards to his goal kicking. You imagine Ben Thomas got a good shot at being a starting 12. So I wonder if there'll be kind of word said of Ben should be the goal kicker going forward. So yeah, I really hope Ben's goal kicking come Saturday.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. A couple of people have said, "Oh, does it impact Sheedy's goal kicking, his selection in the Wales 23, having made the squad?" But I think looking at that squad, the likelihood is it's going to be one of Ben Thomas or Joe Hawkins at 12 pretty much throughout the autumn. And both of them, I don't know if Joe Hawkins is like a brilliant goal kicker as such, but he is a competent goal kicker at least. So I suspect one of those two will be doing most of the goal kicking and then allowing Sheedy, who probably starts as second choice behind Dan Edwards, I would imagine. But when he comes on, he won't have that pressure on him. He can just go and play a bit. Recapping the team then from 1 to 23, we've got Corey Domachowski, Liam Belcher, Kieran Nazarati, Josh McNally, George Knott, Ben Donnell, Tane Basham, Tulupe Falatau, Joan Mulder, Callum Sheedy, Tom Bowen, Ben Thomas, Harry Millard, Josh Adams, Jacob Beetham, and on the bench, Evan Lloyd, Danny Southworth, Javon Sebastian, Rory Thornton, Alan Lawrence, Alex Mann, Aled Davis, and Johan Lloyd. Steve, confident in that team that can get the job done?
Yeah, I mean hearing it, that's a team that's good enough to win. We'll see what sort of team Edinburgh bring down. It's likely to be another tight game. It's likely to be an attritional sort of game, but I think that's a team that can win it, and they've demonstrated that they can win those sorts of games. And like I say, it's a big one, and it'll put us in a very nice position on the field, in the league table, if we get it over the line. Looking forward to it.
Good stuff. And any more for any more? Well, just one piece of other business. Rob Ferris asks, why have we only got one giant screen this season? Which is, I think, is
Oh,
taken a little bit of conversation on the terraces in the last game. It was in the first game, I think it was in the clubhouse end, but it was up at the between the north stand and the hospitality boxes in the second game. I asked the club, and the answer was it's just a club decision. They've only wanted to run one this season, basically, and that they're going to stick with it in that corner of the north and hospitality boxes because it opens up a lot more space between the clubhouse and the family stand to be used by fans milling around there, having a drink before the game, basically. And I think the general feeling is the screens weren't great anyway, so it's not a huge loss to supporter experience. I have to say, if you did want to look at it, what I did during the Connacht game, which worked quite well, and I think we're on S4C again this weekend, is just pull up iPlayer on your phone. It's about 45 seconds behind the live coverage anyway, so you get an immediate instant replay on your phone, which is quite handy. Although it did mean that I just had a real good close up of Teddy Williams' foot hanging off rather than any of the action, which I'd rather not have seen that, to be honest. If somebody could have pre warned that's what it would have been, that would have been great. But with that, then, we'll be back next week for our last pod of the first block as well. We'll look back on that Edinburgh game, review the block as a whole, and look ahead to the autumn internationals. We also might have some off-field news. WRU had said it was by the end of October they might be announcing something. Whether that's going to be the case or not is anyone's guess. But thank you, gents, for joining me. Thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next week.